Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Extreme Desert Challenge. Last time we left off after an episode filled with technological advances, we also had several injuries and illnesses, and as you can see, Jake is actually still recovering. We also obtained a new colonist in Alistair, who we promptly put into a cryptosleep casket, at least until we have the necessary medical equipment to cure him of his disease. Starting things off today, we will now be making some kibble. Our dogs have been feeding on potatoes for quite some time now, but after hunting a small group of boar in the last episode, we finally have meat back on the menu. We will also begin flooring our 2 remaining bedrooms. That is something that I kind of overlooked in the last video, but of course Jake and Troy deserve decent bedrooms as well. And so the day progresses. As usual, Troy spends most of his time at the research bench, Redhawk and Edmo take care of some gardening work, and well, Jake is still recovering from an infection, so for the time being he doesn't really contribute much. In the evening though, we can finally see him leave the hospital as he has apparently developed an immunity, and a few hours later he continues working where Steak left off, I imagine much to the annoyance of Troy, who is just trying to get some sleep. And so the next morning arrives, and so does trouble in the desert. We have a tribespeople raid approaching, and it's not a small one either. To make matters worse, they actually have sappers in their ranks, so they will likely attempt to break through some of our walls to get inside of our base. But these are just tribalists, so they're not too well protected, and we are definitely better equipped. I also realized that they actually only have one dedicated digger among them, so if we take out Porcupine here, then I'm pretty sure that the rest of them should behave just like normal raiders. And coincidentally enough, she is running ahead of the group by quite some distance, which should not make it too difficult for us to take her down. Alright, digger down, which means it's high time to retreat and to lure the rest of our enemies into our small kill box, which we actually haven't really tested yet, and I think this is a good opportunity to see how much damage it can do. Now, as you can see, some of our colonists will provide fire support here, at least until the enemies get too close for comfort. Now, unsurprisingly, I think we do have quite the advantage here. Our enemies don't actually make it anywhere near our turrets, and to cut a long story short, in the end they are forced to flee. Now, our walls and defenses did take a bit of damage, but that's nothing that we can't fix, and we also obtained a decent amount of loot here, 18 units of herbal medicine, some weapons and some beer. That is nothing spectacular, but it sure does help. Now, the rest of the morning is spent with cleaning up the battlefield. Steak takes care of corpse cremation, and some of the weapons can actually be smelted into steel. And thanks to the hauling help of our dogs, a few hours later, only a big pile of blood reminds us of the battle that took place. The dynamic duo of Jake and Steak then takes care of the repairs, while Edmo and Redhawk are harvesting another batch of rice. Speaking of field work, at this point we can also start sowing out some devil strand. These mushrooms will take quite some time to fully mature, but we have some growing space available for them right here inside of our base. And so another evening rolls around. A few of our tasks are not quite finished just yet, but I think it's safe to say that we're making some progress. Very early on the next morning then, we have Edmo put down the last few remaining mushrooms, and right around that time we also have some visitors arrive, and it looks like they have some items to trade. Now, while we're on the topic of trading, we still have this big growing zone here that is currently unused, and I think it might be a good idea to grow more psychoid plants here, so that we can drastically ramp up our drug production and therefore make even more money. For the moment though, we don't have a whole lot in storage, so let's see if we can purchase anything here. Right, so the tech print here is unfortunately slightly outside of our price range, and that is also really the only item of interest these guys have, so let us just sell a bit of stuff to clear some inventory space and to make a small profit. And just a few moments later, after we have just sold them, I believe 4 different types of bows, the caravan leaves us a gift, and it is, surprise surprise, another bow. And with that they leave, so we'll now have to find someone else to sell that to, but for the time being I think we have bigger concerns. We do, for example, need to make some more building materials, because our base expansion is of course far from finished, and flooring all of our bedrooms, that cost us quite a few resources. In the evening though, we can see there are stone tiles everywhere, but as always we have more work to do. Now, as you know, playing in the desert, a lot of the ground here is made out of sand. And as young Skywalker once said, sand gets everywhere, and that is true for this game as well. Which means the more of our ground we cover with actual stone tiles, the less frequently our colonists have to walk across sand, and the less dirt accumulates throughout our base. Now, this will certainly not get rid of the problem entirely, but it also has the lovely side effect of improving our courtyard's beauty somewhat, so I think it's a worthwhile investment. The project is quickly interrupted, however, as we have the first quest of today's episode pop up. We are being asked here to provide a landing space for an Imperial shuttle, and to also provide protection for the shuttle's commander as well as another civilian. And looking at the potential rewards here, I think in just a moment we are going to take this quest. First of all though, let's keep building for a short while longer. In terms of quest rewards, we are then not going for the honor. I don't really want Steak to obtain the next royal title too quickly. We will also forgo the power claw because that is something that we can build ourselves rather soon, I think. So instead we're going with goodwill to improve the faction relations with the Empire. If we can make arguably the most powerful faction on this planet our ally, I think that would be useful. But of course, first of all, we have to succeed in a quest that has the potential to become a bit tricky. Now, as you can see here, the shuttle was carrying 6 people, including the commander here and the civilian named Sheet. And we need to keep both of them alive in order to complete this quest. The 4 soldiers, meanwhile, are very much expendable. Now, arguably the biggest issue about this quest is going to be that these guys will remain exactly where they are. They will not leave the crash site in order to hang out in our base, for example. Instead, they will simply hang around the shuttle until the enemies arrive. And as you can imagine, even with our help, that approach is likely going to result in a few casualties, and that is something that we have to avoid. So, if the guys that we have to help do not come to us, then we have to come to them, and ideally we are bringing some defenses with us. We will now be constructing just a few walls around the shuttle, and hopefully the 2 people that we need to protect are smart enough to use those to their advantage. We will also put up a few sandbags around the structure, because we really don't know where our enemies will be coming from, although if they come from the left side then they will meet our base first, which might give us a few more options. And thanks to the combined efforts of Jake, Steak and Edmo, the entire structure is put up pretty quickly, just in time actually, because here come our enemies. There are 9 of them, and almost all of them have ranged weapons, so in terms of numbers we should be evenly matched. The question is, were our preparations enough to give us the advantage? Now, there are also 4 donkeys here, which we want to keep in mind, but right now the fight is on, so let's see how this goes. Now, right away, our enemies are running into open fire without any sort of cover, while our 2 VIPs actually do a pretty decent job staying back and out of danger. Unfortunately though, that doesn't really last too long. As you can see here, Sheet has already engaged in a fist fight with one of the attackers, but thankfully our helping hands are ready to intervene. And I would like to think that in large parts, thanks to our defensive setup, it doesn't take too long to cause our enemies to flee. If I'm not mistaken, then our side did not actually suffer a single casualty, our 5 colonists did not even get injured, and with that, the quest has successfully been completed. Now, with Steak here, we can even attempt to hunt down one of the remaining attackers. The burden ability does come in handy for that, and shortly after, another raider falls dead. Now, at this point, we can shift our attention over to the donkeys. My first instinct was to hunt them down for meat, but they are actually pretty decent hauling animals too, so let's try to tame them instead and see how that goes. Compared to our dogs, the donkey's biggest advantage is that they can eat raw hay, and as you may have noticed, we have plenty of that. Back at the crash site, one of our attackers also dropped a flak vest, and since it's not tainted, Steak can quickly put that on. Then begins the cleanup and hauling work, which lasts well into the evening. And while all of that is going on, we also have cargo pods drop down. It looks like Randy might be rewarding us here for our decision not to hunt the donkeys, as we now have an easy way to obtain 136 units of alpaca meat. And while Red Hawk is bringing all of that back to the base, our visitors' rescue shuttle arrives, so they will now all get inside, leave, and in a few moments we will receive our quest reward. Prior to that, however, Jake has successfully tamed one of the donkeys. It is a pretty old one though at 22 years. As you can see, this animal only has a life expectancy of 24 years, so I'm not entirely certain yet if we'll keep it, and for that reason we will not give it a name just yet. A few moments later then, the shuttle takes off and the quest is officially completed. We have moved our faction relationships slightly towards the positive, and who knows, maybe we can in fact become allies one day. Our taming session, meanwhile, continues with great success. A second, slightly younger female donkey has now been tamed, and from the list of patrons in the naming rights tier and above, it will receive the name Froome. Same procedure then for a male donkey that was just tamed by Troy. This guy will now go by the name of Bradley after patron Bradley Butler, and just a few seconds later our fourth and final donkey is tamed, and he will receive the name Tiemo. And at this point we might as well give the first one a name too, and the one that was chosen for her is Modified, and with that we now have 4 donkeys to support our 4 dogs. And while the animals are making their way back to the base, we have another quest appear. This time we are being asked to simply go on a rescue mission. If we succeed, then the colonist in danger will join us. However, we do not actually know anything about the threat that is waiting for us, and we also have no idea what this colonist can and cannot do. So this might be a potentially risky endeavor, but if Orion here has a decent set of skills, then a potentially lucrative one as well. As you can see, we would have to travel a bit for this one, but then again it's not too far and we should be able to make it over there in less than a day. So let me know if you think that we should take this. Again, at the moment we don't really know a lot about the risks and rewards, but of course that doesn't mean that we have to skip it. Back in the base meanwhile, night has set and we are jumping ahead to the next morning. Troy and Jake are both already taking care of the donkeys with some hay grass and some training. Troy then actually forms a bond with one of the animals, while Steak constructs another small animal stable. At the shuttle crash site, meanwhile, we can now also reclaim most of the resources we used, and on top of that we can also deconstruct the shuttle itself, which yields a small amount of steel, plasteel and components. And apart from a bit of farming, cooking and researching, of course, that is all that happens today, at least until in the evening we can see Red Hawk smelt down a few more weapons, and we also receive some fantastic news, as Noosa has given birth to 3 Labrador Retriever puppies. Now, we will not be giving these 3 a name just yet, but don't worry. My plan is to simply sell them to the next trader or launch a caravan of our own. I think we have enough hauling power for the moment and I don't want to go overboard with the animals, especially not with the dogs, who once again always need a bit of meat to keep them happy. Speaking of meat, on the next morning we once again have trouble arrive, not in the form of raiders this time, but in the form of a rather large pack of man-hunting cougars. And well, our defenses have been serviceable once, so I don't see why we shouldn't use them again, even though these animals will arguably be a little bit harder to take down than simple tribal raiders. Still, for the first few seconds here, things are working out quite well for us. Several animals have already gone down and we are doing a good job keeping up with the repairs. These wooden walls and doors are unfortunately a little easy to break through, but on soft sand they are the only structures that we can build. The animals, meanwhile, are making a beeline for our turrets, and unfortunately we can't turn them off fast enough, and so we unfortunately lose one here before the cougars themselves lose interest. Now, from that point onwards, it is then a steady, albeit somewhat micromanagey back and forth. As soon as the animals have gained a bit of distance, we can turn the turrets back on, with fire support also coming in from the sides that then results in a few casualties, and if the situation gets too dicey, we can always turn the turrets back off. Now, in the middle of the fight, we are then interrupted by good news from the research bench. Troy has finally unlocked flak armor, so we can now make a few more protective clothing items. And up next, we are going straight for gas operation. This will unlock some of the more useful weapons in the game, particularly the heavy SMG, and if we're fast enough, then we might even be able to use Steak's inspiration to make one. That is, if Steak survives until then, because he is a little bit late to retreat here, and as a result gets tangled up in melee combat with one of the cougars. Fortunately enough though, we have help standing by, so the animal doesn't last long, and perhaps thanks to his new flak vest, Steak himself does not even suffer a single injury. Just a few seconds later then, the last cougar falls, and with that the threat has been taken care of, and it looks like at least one of the corpses here is still worth butchering. The other ones will of course swiftly be burned, because no one wants to look at that, and thankfully we even have enough materials to not only replace our lost turret, but also construct a second one right next to it. Our next event is then one that we have continuously ignored for now, and I think we'll do that again here. The Royal Tribute Collector has arrived, and even though I briefly thought about sending Alistair with them, for some unspecified reason we cannot actually capture him, and of course it would also be a rather uncivilized thing to do, so he has to remain in the cryptosleep casket for a while longer. And so the evening rolls around, and I have actually assigned Steak as one of our primary researchers as well now. His inspiration unfortunately won't last too long, so we need to get this research project completed as quickly as possible. Before the night can set, we then also have another trader arrive, but before we engage with them, let's manufacture a few more trade goods. This looks to be a rather sizable caravan, so the odds are that they have plenty of stuff to sell. And with 18 units of flake in our storage room, we can now send Redhawk out to greet them. Let's see if they have anything of interest. Alright, and interesting wares they do have, but we'll have to do a bit of selling to afford them. That includes, as planned, our 3 puppies, but also our 2 oldest male and female donkeys, Bradley and Modified. In exchange, we'll then get a hold of 2 young alpacas, which are actually some pretty damn useful animals. Now, unlike the donkey, they cannot actually haul anything, and their carrying capacity in caravans is also a little lower, but they also require much less food, and very importantly, they actually produce something, namely the very useful alpaca wool. Now, alpaca wool mostly keeps warm and doesn't necessarily protect that well against the heat, but it has a decent market value, and alpacas are actually among the most efficient wool-producing animals in the entire game. Now, unfortunately, we're only able to obtain 2 males here, so a female alpaca is now very high up on our shopping list, but still, for the time being, I think this is a very good trade. We are selling just a few more things here, mostly drugs and unused clothing, and still we have to pay just over 200 silver for the 2 animals, but we now have some alpacas and can welcome them to our colony. And don't worry, the names Bradley and Modified will not be wasted that quickly. With our 2 donkeys gone, we can simply give them to our 2 new animals, so that they remain part of the playthrough for a little while longer. On the next morning then we have, yes, even more visitors pass by, and once again we are able to do some trading here. So the area around our base is starting to get a bit crowded, as a red hawk once again welcomes our visitors in the hopes of striking a good deal. And while we cannot buy anything useful here, we can sell quite a few useless weapons, and in doing so earn back some of the silver that we just spent. Eventually then, as the day progresses, all 3 groups of travelers are leaving again. In the afternoon, we can quickly check in with Troy and Steak, and we can see they are making good progress in the research department. We still have a little over 1 day until Steak's creativity inspiration expires, so if the 2 of them keep working hard and nothing serious comes up in the meantime, then I am moderately confident that they should be able to beat that. In the evening then, the last trade caravan finally makes its exit, and with that I think we have reached a good point to make the cut in today's episode. Once again, let me know in the comments down below what you think about that quest that we still have active, and if you want to, also what you think about our latest piece of fan art, because yes, we once again have something to show off. This lovely picture here was drawn by Tony Murchison and sent to me via email, and as you have probably already guessed, it displays Alistair, who is really not participating much at the moment, but who knows, that might change in the near future. In any case, Tony, thank you very much for this absolutely lovely artwork. Every time I receive something like this, it really makes my day. With that being said, let's wrap things up for today. As always, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, then I would of course be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course do so, for example by subscribing to stay up to date, by grabbing some merchandise over on shop.petecomplete.com, or by checking out and maybe even pledging to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.